Some people experience blissful ecstasy right before a seizure. Could understanding this feeling help treat depression? A neurologist shares her thoughts and research about ecstatic epilepsy in a wide-ranging conversation on how we perceive the world, and create the world we perceive. An illustration of a brain with rows of EEG waves over it. People with a rare form of epilepsy have reported feelings of bliss just before having a seizure. A French-Swiss neurologist has pinned down where this aura originates in the brain in hopes that one day, that feeling might be reproduced non-invasively in others. Katarina Kahn/Science Photo Library via Getty Images. Joe Marchant. Joe Marchant. October 3, 2025. Get our newsletter. Imagine we could switch on bliss, the feeling that everything in your body and the world is completely, utterly, perfect. That might one day be possible, according to Fabien Picard, a French-Swiss neurologist who studies a rare form of epilepsy that causes patients to experience moments of such ecstasy. She became interested in the condition after reading the work of the 19th-century Russian novelist Fyodor Dostoevsky. He used his own experiences with epilepsy, a brain condition that leads to recurring seizures, as inspiration for his novels. In particular, he described a profound and intriguing feeling that would strike him just before the seizure itself. For a few moments, all of his doubts and anxieties disappeared, and the world felt perfectly vivid and clear. He told a friend that he felt entirely in harmony with myself and the whole world, and this feeling is so strong and so delightful that for a few seconds of such bliss one would gladly give up 10 years of one's life, if not one's whole life. Picard asked her patients whether any of them had experienced a similar feeling and found that some of them had, they'd just never had the opportunity to talk about it in conventional consultations. She has since identified dozens of cases of ecstatic epilepsy, pinned down which part of the brain is involved and even triggered this feeling in patients who didn't have this kind of epilepsy. That raises the possibility that others might one day benefit from such episodes of bliss, without the devastating seizures that follow. Picard has a hypothesis for why a tiny part of the brain is able to create such a profound, and even, for some, a spiritual, experience, and her work has implications not just for how the brain functions but for the human condition, how we each create the world we perceive and how we might peek beyond our own biases and filters to what connects us. I recently spoke with Picard for my new weekly podcast, Where the Wild Thoughts Are, Conversations in Science and Beyond. The following is a transcript of our conversation, edited for clarity. Subscribe to the podcast here. Joe Marchant, what happens in the brain during an epileptic seizure? Fabien Picard, epileptic seizures are a sort of electrical storm in the brain. They occur when hyperexcitable neurons in a region of the brain discharge spontaneously and synchronously, for anything from a few seconds to a few minutes. You can have generalized seizures, when the discharge comes from the whole brain, or focal seizures that start just in one area of one hemisphere and may spread through the brain, giving rise to different symptoms. Maybe at first the patient is conscious, then there can be an alteration of awareness, and then there can be convulsions, so it's dynamic. Marchant, these first effects that occur when the patient is still conscious, that's called an aura? Picard, yes. The first discharge, depending on its location in the brain, can give rise to a feeling that is just experienced by the patient and not visible at all from outside. It's very varied, although it will always be the same for any particular person. It can be a feeling of fear coming from the stomach and going up to the head. It can be auditory hallucinations. It can be to see a scene that you have experienced in the past, or not. It can be emotions. Everything you can have in everyday life can occur during a seizure, but also symptoms that you never experience in everyday life, such as ecstatic symptoms. Marchant, what is ecstatic epilepsy, and how did you first come across it? Picard, ecstatic epilepsy is a rare form of epilepsy in which people feel at the beginning of the seizures an amazing feeling of fullness and of bliss. About 15 years ago, at the request of a friend who was an actor, we decided to do a performance about epilepsy. Our goal was to raise public awareness about epilepsy by using historical testimonies from famous people who suffered from epilepsy, punctuated by musical pieces on the piano. Among the texts, there were some from Dostoevsky, who suffered from ecstatic epilepsy. He used descriptions of his own seizures for characters in his novels. Marchant, what do we know about Dostoevsky's experiences? Picard, he put some observations on his disease in the notebooks for his novels. There were also some confidences about his epilepsy in his letters to friends, and from his second wife, in her diary. We know that his epilepsy started late, around the age of 20, and that he had around 2 seizures per month. He described the beginning of his seizures as an incredible feeling of fullness that he never experienced in his everyday life. Following his auras, he also had classic convulsions. We learned that he didn't want to bend to the epilepsy, to submit to it. He knew he would have less seizures if he went to bed early, but he preferred to write his novels from 10 p.m. in the evening till 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning, because these were the hours of creativity for him. And he introduced epileptic characters into several of his novels. Nellie was the first epileptic central character, in the novel Humiliated and Insulted. Then there was Prince Mishkin in The Idiot, and characters in other novels. I think this introduction of people with epilepsy into his novels allowed the public at that time to become aware of this condition, without stigmatizing people with epilepsy. Did you know? Epilepsy. Roughly 1.2% of people in the United States have epilepsy. The condition is diagnosed after someone has had more than 2 unprovoked seizures that occur more than 24 hours apart. Marchant, when you learned about Dostoevsky's condition, had you ever seen a bliss aura in a patient? Picard, no, not before. It was after reading Dostoevsky's texts, where he described with such finesse and precision what he felt at the beginning of his seizures, that I began to be more interested in the details of my patients' symptoms. These patients with ecstatic symptoms were usually reluctant to speak about this kind of experience, because they were afraid to be thought crazy, or they couldn't find the words to talk about it. But when I questioned them with more patience and curiosity, I discovered other people describing the same symptoms. They describe it as a sort of enlightenment, of revelation. They have a physical well-being. They feel complete serenity, with no doubts or worries. They describe a mental clarity, or certainty, everything is as it should be, everything makes sense. And they feel a heightened self-awareness. Marchant, it sounds amazing. Picard, often, they feel a time dilation, so they feel as if they are in an eternal now. Sometimes they perceive the environment more vividly, and they feel a sense of unity with the universe, with everything. Marchant, were these experiences important to your patients in the way that they were to Dostoevsky? Picard, yes. Many patients with this kind of epilepsy say it has had a transformative effect. One patient reported that she didn't fear death anymore. Another said that the ecstatic experiences helped her to feel more confident, because she understood that there is something that surpasses us, something greater than us. Marchant, you wanted to find the cause of these auras. How did you go about pinning down what area of the brain was involved?